Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into my continuing series looking ahead at future college football schedules, 3 teams at a time. And today we've got a very up-and-coming Wisconsin team. We're going to be looking at Nebraska along with Washington, who definitely has a lot of preseason hype with their number 1 quarterback returning. So beginning, guys, with Wisconsin, this team keeps getting better by the day. It is remarkable. I cannot applaud them enough for going and getting Luke Fickell and saying our program isn't good enough. We're going to invest more into football. And through the transfer portal, several quarterbacks, they're going to be very improved. Getting Braylon Allen back when there was a question mark about him possibly transferring, they absolutely should be a preseason top 25 team. I had them at number 18 in my way too early rankings. Let's take a look at their schedule. So they start off week 1 against Buffalo. They normally always face a MAC team, so that should be an easy win. Week 2, the return game of the home and home with Washington State. Of course, they lost to Washington State at home as, I believe, 17-point favorites, so certainly I would favor them, even though it is on the road and it's going to be a tough environment. I would favor them to beat Washington State. I would imagine they'd probably be at least 3-point favorites in that game, maybe even more. We will see. Next, they've got Georgia Southern, another easy game. Then they get Purdue on the road. Purdue is a very hard team to gauge. They got a nice transfer QB, Hudson Card, who was the backup for Texas, played a little bit and showed some things in his career there. He's a veteran. But if you're Wisconsin, Purdue, especially with what you've done in the portal compared to Purdue losing Jeff Brom and such, that is a winnable game. They get a pretty early bye week after their first 4 weeks. Then they get Rutgers and Iowa at home. The Rutgers game is a freebie. The Iowa home game could be interesting. I do think Iowa will be improved next year, even though they are losing defensive talent. They always have a good defense no matter what. And they should be getting significantly better on the offensive side of the ball, you would think, but they still face that innovation problem. I believe they've got the exact same coaches that they've had the past few years. I know Iowa fans are very disappointed in that, but I do expect Iowa to be better. If you are Wisconsin, you're very happy. This is a home game. Next, they have a game at Illinois. Personally, guys, Illinois is going to be a lot worse next year. They'll probably be 5-7, maybe 4-8. Losing their defensive coordinator is very hard. They losing Chase Brown, losing Witherspoon, potential number 1 cornerback in the draft. That should be a relatively easy win for Wisconsin. I know people right now would say, oh, it's a toss-up because Illinois was really good. I almost think Illinois' 2022 year was similar to Indiana's 2020 season. You can't say it's the exact same because I do give Illinois credit. It's not during the pandemic, so it's much harder to do it in a regular year, but it does seem like kind of a fluke outlier season. Illinois is still not recruiting well. They're still not doing much in the portal. That should be a relatively easy win, even though it is on the road for Wisconsin. You get the huge game, the home game against Ohio State. Going into that game, if you are Wisconsin, at worst, you want to have 1 loss. Preferably, you want to be undefeated, and you want that game at night. Maybe Ohio State lucks out, and that's the big noon game. But at the absolute worst, if you're Wisconsin, you have 1 loss going into that game. Ohio State, they have more talent. We all know that, but it's a very hard place to play, and you want the crowd energized, and the way you get the crowd really energized is by having a great start to the season and being ranked against a potential top 10 Ohio State. At Indiana, right after the Ohio State game, should be an easy win. Northwestern at home should be an easy win. Nebraska at home, even with Matt Rule, it's his first year. I'm guessing that's another easy win. This is the Big Ten West we're talking about. It's a relatively very easy schedule. And then at Minnesota, that's another team that I think is going to take a major step back. losing the quarterback experience of Tanner Morgan, although maybe Tanner Morgan will try and return for a 16th season, who knows. But guys, this is a very manageable schedule, and it's absolutely critical. Luke Fickell, in his first year, goes to the Big Ten Championship from the West with one, maybe two losses at the most. The Ohio State game, even though it is at home, is going to be tough. Other than that, I mean, that's a Washington State game. I know it's on the road, but you got to win it. You've got to win it. Next, we're looking at Nebraska. So Nebraska is returning Casey Thompson, who at this point has a ton of experience at the QB position. They've got their spring game. They always sell that out. But their first game is on a Thursday at Minnesota. So I'm guessing that'll be the Thursday night Fox game that they always open up with. You know, they have one of those type of games. Ohio State was on it 2 years ago. Penn State, Purdue was last year. This year, it's Nebraska at Minnesota. It's winnable. It's Matt Rule's first game. It is on the road, but it is winnable. I don't think Minnesota, again, is going to be that good. Then they're on the road at Colorado and Deion Sanders. We know Colorado was terrible last year, but they're a complete mixed bag with a totally different remade roster through the portal and such. You've got Northern Illinois the week after that. That's got to be a win. Although with Nebraska in the past, you know, it's dicey. Louisiana Tech then in week 5. You'd figure that's another game you got to win. Michigan at home. That could be a really fun game. You know, Nebraska always brings it in terms of the crowd, but they will be pretty big underdogs in that game against Michigan, with Michigan returning J.J. McCarthy, Donovan Edwards, and now Blake Corum as well. At Illinois, very winnable. If you're Matt Rule and you want to have a good first year, you got to beat Illinois. No questions asked. You get a bye week in the middle of the season. Northwestern at home, Purdue at home. Those are games you've got to win. At Michigan State, probably going to be slight underdogs. Michigan State under Mel Tucker. It's very hard to predict what they're really going to do from a year-to-year basis. We saw 2 years ago the portal edition of Kenneth Walker really save them and get them into a New Year's Six Bowl, and then this past year it was horrible, and they didn't even make a bowl game. Maryland at home, it's a winnable game, but I do think Maryland might return Tagovailoa, the quarterback. They are losing significant receiver weapons, though. At Wisconsin, that's going to be tough. And then versus Iowa, that's a tough close to the season. So if you're Nebraska, you know, that week 1 game is so critical. I know it's on the road, but Minnesota this coming year is beatable. That would be huge to get that win. At Colorado, it'll be fun. It's just tough to know what to expect from Colorado. You've got to win, you know, the games against Northern Illinois, Louisiana Tech, at Illinois, versus Northwestern, versus Purdue. The goal should be to get this team relevant and shoot for around 8 wins if you are Nebraska in Matt Rule's first year, to really bring some life into the program. And then finally, we're looking at Washington's 2023 schedule. Some people think Washington is the favorite in the Pac-12, and what a great start we have here. Boise State, they're always a good team. They had a nice season last year, and that should be a really fun home game for Washington. You've got Tulsa week 2. That's a free win. The home and home with Michigan State, that, you know, semi-tough, but Michigan State very beatable. They've had a bad secondary the past 2 years. So if you are Washington, you really got to utilize your passing attack. The one major concern with Washington for me, has their defense really improved to the point to where they're going to be able to defend some of these teams? You know, let's look at this schedule. These dates are all to be announced, so this is not the order. The first 3 games is the correct order, meaning they'll face Boise State week 1, Tulsa week 2, Michigan State week 3. That's kind of a tough non-conference with Boise State not being a pushover. Tulsa's a free win. MSU on the road. It's hard because it's a road game, but it's a game you can easily win. At Arizona, that's a road game. That's a game you got to win. At Oregon State had a very nice year, but, you know, we'll see how they are with the Clemson transfer DJ Uiagalelei. There's some question marks surrounding him. At Stanford without David Shaw, you know, Stanford's been basically a dead program the past 3 or 4 years. At USC is rough. It's going to be hard. You're probably going to be underdogs against Caleb Williams, the Heisman Trophy winner, but USC, you know, is beatable. And if you are Washington, you have to be optimistic with your passing offense against that USC defense. And then the home schedule, Arizona State at home, game you got to win. California at home, another game you've got to win. Oregon at home, that's going to be tough with Bo Nix. Utah at home is going to be tough, but you're probably going to be favorites. Utah, even though they do return Cam Rising, I believe, they are losing their number one cornerback. They are losing a superstar tight end. So they are losing, a few different pieces there. And then Washington State, the rivalry game at the end of the regular season. So overall for Washington, I think it's very important you go 3-0 in non-conference play if you want a chance at the playoffs, because the odds of you beating both Oregon and USC, especially with USC being on the road, it's very hard. I see them going 1-1. Again, I have concerns about Washington's defense still at this point and how much they're able to actually improve it in terms of being the best team in the Pac-12. But I'll say for the Pac-12 and this type of schedule, it sets up pretty nicely for Washington. You really only have one real tough road games. You get Utah at home, you get Oregon at home. I guess you could make an argument that Oregon State's a tough road game because I do understand they were a top 20 team this past year, but that's a program that hasn't consistently showed us they are a top 20 team. So I'm going to have to see it again for Washington. And then I did quickly want to look at UTSA's current schedule. So these are the only 4 games on their schedule. Guys, the story with UTSA, they're returning their starting quarterback, Frank Harris, for a 7th year. And he's a really good quarterback, so they're going to have a ton of experience. But look at this non-conference schedule. At Houston, versus Texas State, versus Army, and at Tennessee. That's a pretty brutal non-conference schedule for UTSA, but I'll give a bold prediction. I think they beat Houston. I mean, Houston is losing Nathaniel Dell. They were kind of already a disappointment last year as it is. You beat Houston, you beat Texas State. Army is a triple option. It's tough, but you got to win that game. And then you get at Tennessee. That is a brutally hard game. That might be ranked versus ranked if UTSA starts off 3-0. Who knows? It could be, but I just wanted to kind of go over that, and kind of end off the video, look at their schedule. Overall, I'll say Wisconsin, you've got to be optimistic about getting back to the Big Ten championship. They should be the favorites in the West, no doubt. Nebraska should try and shoot for 8 or 9 wins, but probably 8 if you're trying to take baby steps. And then Washington, certainly you're hoping to make the Pac-12 championship this year with what you return and the hype surrounding their program. There are several opinions that Washington might be a preseason top 10 or 12 team this coming year. So guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.